The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Welcome to a discussion with author Helena Viramontes. She's the author of Under the Feet of Jesus, just published by Dutton Press. Helena, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Steve.
Helena is also a community organizer. She was a co-coordinator of the Los Angeles Latino Writers Association. She's won a number of literary awards and currently is an assistant professor of creative writing at the University of Cornell in Ithaca, New York. I want to talk about this wonderful patch quilt of people charred by the sun, the Pescadores. Tell us about your background in the fields.
Well, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and my husband, my father was a hod carrier. He was one of these laborers who used to carry cement, 60 pounds of cement on the bridge of his back and take it to the plasterers. He used to plaster the buildings in Los Angeles. In fact, we can go through downtown Los Angeles, and he can say, you know, I worked on that one and I worked on that one. But because we had such a huge family, we were a family of 11 with always, you know, cousins or uncles staying with us at any given time. It was very financially difficult for my father to support us, and in fact, we used to go up to Northern California and pick grapes for a financial supplement. So those were the experiences that I put in Under the Feet of Jesus, but also my husband, who was a migrant farm worker. He was truly a migrant farm worker in the sense that he went from state to state and then ended up in Pontiac, Michigan. But that's how he pretty much supported his family and also supported to a certain extent his high school and undergraduate education. And just, you know, by his experiences and, you know, I was able to visualize some of his experiences and kind of portray them in the character of Alejo in Under the Feet of Jesus. So these are the people that I write about in this novel, of course, are very dear to my heart. These are, you know, my husband, myself, my mother and my father, who met in Buttonwillow picking cotton.
Yes, they were picking cotton.
Yeah, they were picking cotton. See, people ask me, what is your you know, what is your goal with this book? What did you think you had in mind with this book? And I thought, you know, if I can possibly, I mean, I really, sure, I think maybe I can change the world as the writer, okay. But if I can get people to understand that the people in the fields who are basically invisible in the sense that, I mean, when we eat our salad or when we bite on an apple or a peach, do we think, you know, where do these things come from and who picked them and whose hands and sweat, you know, brought these peaches to our table? We don't think of the pescadores. And for me, it was my goal to open up that world, to say, look at, we are people, we love, we fight, we have children, and we laughed and we sing, and, you know, and so,
one of the ironies about American society is now we talk about the collapse of the family, and yet here you have multi-generational families, from grandparents down to very tiny babies who are in the fields all day together.
Right, and it's interesting to know. People have asked me, well, how have you, from a family of 11 in an impoverished environment, you know, picking grapes? How have you done it, Helena, to be able to go on and finish an undergraduate education and, you know, get a position at Cornell, for example? And I tell them, really, it was the basis of the family. You know, even though it was very hard because we were such a large family, there was such caring and such compassion that we learned. I mean, we didn't take things for granted. Everything, I mean, even the sweater, the shoes that we got, we didn't take for granted. And my sisters, my older sisters, for example, sacrificed a lot of their own lives in order so that the younger children would be able to have things like bikes or you know, dresses for a particular occasion or things like that. I have one sister who was a dynamite. You know, she was a straight-A student at a Catholic high school, senior class president. I mean, she would have been a phenomenal PhD, I'm convinced. But in fact, went right into the workforce as a receptionist and has been working since in secretarial positions.
Well, that strong sense of sacrifice and family loyalty comes through very strongly in the book.
Well, you know, you have no one else but your family, and so you have to pretty much tighten it. But that can also be a suffocating, event. And for example, Estrella, here her mother really depends on her to take care of the children, to help her with the family, to help her in terms of the finances. Whereas Estrella, is just a young woman coming into her own. And in fact, at one point she doesn't have any dreams, in the sense that she realized that maybe there is no life outside of that. And then when she meets Alejo and they seem to have fallen into a wonderful friendship, she realizes that there is much more.
Is there bitterness within the community about that lack of childhood?
To a certain extent, yes. I know that I know for myself that I had no childhood. I didn't, and I guess I play it out now, with my own children. But yeah, I suppose so. It's a pretty rough life. At the same time, there is that ultimate obligation and responsibility that you have with the family. And as I was saying before, oftentimes that can lead to some very stilted sort of social skills, in the sense that I remember I was working with the MITE program, that's the Migrant Education Program back in California, and I was teaching creative writing to a group of students, high school students, who for the first time in their lives did not have to work the summer in the fields, but were given a stipend to come to a summer school, to come to UCLA, to see a university, to sort of get what Estrella got, in the sense of getting this, that there was something outside of what they were doing. And I was warned right before graduation that these particular children, this was the first time that they ever had the opportunity to actually bond with one another, to actually have friendships outside of the family. And in fact, during graduation, there would be fainting spells, there would be hysteria, there would be, the price of emotional costs for these children not to be able to have that kind of outlet of, social life because of their migrancy lives. When you realize that they don't stay at a place like Estrella. That's why this episode with Maxine, where she actually bonds with somebody, where they read.
And this is a white migrant girl.
Right. This is a white migrant girl, and they read. Estrella learns to read earlier on because she realizes that language is a tool by which she can repair or redo or reinvent.
And also to escape.
Well, absolutely. But again, with the novel, I try to deal with the terms of literacy, in the sense of, she doesn't have access to books. And Maxine comes in, and Maxine has a crate of comic books, but Maxine doesn't know how to read, which is also, you're dealing with, again, even Cesar Chavez, the founder of the United Farm Workers, went to some 60 schools before he graduated from high school. This is the cost of a migrant life for
You've
children.
dedicated the book to him, so obviously he's been a great influence on your life.
Well,
and
yes,
the life of your community.
he's been sort of in my consciousness since my early teens, in the sense that he was an icon, beginning laterally with the Chicano movement during the '60s and the civil rights movement, and just been a real leader in terms of the pescadores. But not only that, also in keeping attention to the fact that we have a responsibility to also, the salt of the earth. We have to take care of the salt of the earth.
Interesting enough, we're both fourth-generation Americans, but I never worry about carrying my passport around with me, except when I leave the country. But that's not true for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was relaying to you the story that I had with I was traveling with my husband, who's also Chicano and grew up in South Texas, and a journalist from the Los Angeles Times. And every time we crossed the border, there was always that internal tension that I never realized that I had until the journalist turned around to me and told me, relax, because immediately upon being interrogated by the customs, I opened my bag and gave him my passport, and the journalist said, "You don't have to do that, Helena. And I had done it every time that I passed, and I realized then, it was a long trip back to Los Angeles, and I realized then, why is it that all this time that I've been crossing the border, feel this type of tension? Well, of course, now with the passing, for example, of Proposition 187, where sort of the hatred that people, or the fear that people have of us, have been sanctioned by this proposition, and now, and now there have been reports of people coming up to people brown people on the streets and saying, "You don't belong here. Go home." Well, of course, home is around the corner. It has been for 4 generations. I mean, and if you want to look even farther down the line, I mean, since the California and most of the Southwest was Mexican territory,
yes.
yeah, until 1849. So. I don't know. It really is very disturbing that other propositions similar to this are sort of being tested in various other states.
There was also an irony that you mentioned earlier when, because I commented on the fact that there are many passages of Spanish in the book, and you mentioned that Cormac McCarthy,
yes.
when he wrote his book, there's lots of Spanish in there, and nobody ever questioned his use of Spanish.
That's right. That's right. But you know, when you have a Spanish surname on the cover, all of a sudden, when the use of Spanish is secretive and kind of holding back and only giving code languages out to a particular audience or a particular reader. I specifically asked when the Spanish was used in this book that it not be italicized. The only time it is because it's a quote of a song. But other than that, no, because when we speak English, we don't italicize our English. I mean, and when I speak Spanish, I don't see it as italicis, and calling it it's also calling attention to it, and I just don't think it would be a healthy way to tell a story.
It's obviously from this book that you have a tremendous love of language.
Yes.
Was Spanish also presumably a part of your growing up, whether it was aunts or uncles or cousins?
This is the interesting aspect. I grew up speaking nothing but Spanish until I started the public school system. And what was going on during the public school system, and in many ways is still going on now, we were punished if we spoke Spanish. I mean, to the point of being physically punished. So with that, I mean, there was an internalized kind of message given to a lot of the children saying, look, Spanish is bad. Everything associated with Spanish is bad. Your parents speak Spanish, maybe they're bad. Your culture is imbued in Spanish, maybe that's bad. I mean, and there was a kind of almost a cultural assault by giving the messages to my generation, and fortunately it's sort of lax now. I mean, you do have bilingual education, but that's under attack right now. I mean, saying the English only kind of thing. But at the same time, I really feel that if I don't have that Spanish language in me, that those first 5 years of my life that has been described and exposed and given in images to me in Spanish, that I would not be able to capture that unless I unlock that side of me that has been sort of repressed. And so I'm looking forward to actually studying the language. I think that's why I am so incredibly, how would I say, interested in the English language too, because I am not comfortable with the Spanish language, and I'm certainly not comfortable with the English language, and I'm constantly groping for words to.
But that's probably what makes you a very exciting writer, is the fact that you don't have that tremendous facility. I mean, it's not there right at your fingertips.
No,
you have to search for it, and so the metaphors come out.
Yeah, that's right, and I do search for it, and it's hard. It really is a struggle to try to find, and but that's the position that every writer is in, and to a certain extent, I'm sort of happy about that.
There's a wonderful series of Fraser book. Another one is the Piscadores are in a truck and they're banging together like loose change, which I loved.
Yeah, that's the way we feel, boy. I'll tell you, right? Those early mornings. One of the, I guess the work ethic too. I mean, there's a 10-year span between my first collection of short stories, The Moths and Other Stories, and this book. And really, it was a matter of doing a lot of community work, a matter of raising 2 children, a matter of organizing 3 major conferences, editing 2 books of nonfiction, just being incredibly busy, and still in all, though, being able to start 2 novels and then a collection of short stories, and then actually start this one. And the way I did that was getting up at 3:45 in the morning and working till 7 o'clock. That way I knew the cat was asleep, my mother was asleep, the children were asleep, and I would be able to concentrate on nothing but my
I want to go back and get in touch with that little girl, Estrella, and perhaps you can read a section from Under the Feet of Jesus for us.
This is, I'll read a couple of little sections skipping around. I will read the beginning of part 2, and this is when Estrella and Alejo are both out in the field. The white light of the sun worked hard. Even the birds wavered on the crest of the heat waves. Under the leafy grapevines, the grapes hung heavy. She had readied the large rectangular sheet of newsprint paper over an even bed of tractor-leveled soil, then placed the wooden frame to hold the paper down. Now, her basket beneath the bunches, Estrella pulled the vine, slit the crescent moon knife across the stem, and the cluster of grapes was guided to the basket below her. Carrying the full basket to the paper was not like the picture on the red raisin boxes Estrella saw in the markets, not like the woman wearing a puffy bonnet holding out the grapes with her smiling ruby lips, the sun a flat orange behind her. The sun was white, and it made Estrella's eyes sting like an onion, and the basket of grapes resisted her muscles, pulling their majestic weight back to the earth. The woman with the red bonnet did not know this. Her knees did not sink in the hot white soil, and she did not know how to pour the basket of grapes inside the frame gently and spread the bunches evenly on the top of newsprint paper. She did not remove the frame, straighten her creaking knees, the bend of her back, set down another sheet of newsprint paper, reset the frame, then returned to the pisca again with an empty basket, row after row, sun after sun. The woman's bonnet would be as useless as Estrella's own straw hat under a white sun so mighty it toasted the green grapes to black raisins. Estrella was not more than 4 when she first accompanied the mother to the fields. She remembered crying just as a small girl was crying now. The mother showed pregnant and wore a large man's pants with the zipper down, and a shirt to cover her drum-tight belly. Even then, the mother seemed old to Estrella, yet she hauled pounds and pounds of cotton by the pull of her back, plucking with her 2 stiff hands, stuffing the cloudy bowls into her burlap sack, the rows of plants between her legs. The sack slowly grew larger and heavier like the swelling child within her. Estrella remembered the mother trying to keep her awake, but the days were so hot, and the sun wanted her to sleep so badly, she became cranky and angry. Finally, the mother gave in, laid a 4-year-old Estrella right on top of her bag of cotton, hushing her to sleep, and Estrella never realized the added weight she must have been on the mother's shoulders as she dragged the bag slowly between the rows of cotton plants. At least, this was how she remembered it. Being lulled to sleep by the softness of the cotton, palms pressed together under her cheek, and the mother's pull almost gentle and pleasing, remembered how good it felt to close her eyes, to rest, to be this close to the mother's pull.
That's a wonderful passage.
Thank you.
You feel that real love between the mother and the child, and yet it's this child, the weight of the sleeping child makes the mother's work even harder.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the women are the anonymous people in the fields.
Right. In fact, there was a discussion with the cover of the book, because originally they didn't have any, they had the pescadores, but they were all men. And I said, oh no, this is a book about women. Yes. Well, it's very unfortunate, and I don't quite understand why that is, but there's a majority of women out there, and women with children, and women who have to take care of the children as they do their pisca, and they still have to go home and then make dinner for everybody else. So,
is that the macho society?
Well, it's a patriarchal society that is both in the dominant culture and, of course, in the Latino culture. And one of the things that I tell people is that when I feel I earn an honest sleep is when I'm critical of both my culture and the dominant culture. So, it's not like we're all totally innocent in this matter. And it's very unfortunate, because in many ways it becomes the patriarchal system does become very suffocating for women in the sense of their own, they're invisible, and I don't see why that should be.
Although it's interesting that many of the best writing in America now is coming out of the Latina writers community. Sandra Benitez, among others, I think of.
Right, and Sandra Cisneros, Ana Castillo, Denise Chavez, Demetria Martinez, Terry de la Peña, Lucha Corpi, only to name a few. But I think I think there are stories there that actually offer gifts to readers, and I think that's why they're getting the attention that, of course, they warrant, in the sense that they, they're great writers, and they're giving an experience, an aspect that is new to the American experience, but also they're giving gifts of stories that provide compassion, that remind us how important it is to truly love. You know, I had the opportunity of working with Gabriel Garcia Marquez at the Sundance Institute back in '89, and one of the things that I always remember about that workshop was that he said, great literature is almost sentimental. And that opened my heart, and it opened my mind to the fact that I could write about love in so many ways and not feel that I'm burning the wings of sentimentality. You know, of course I pull myself back because I'm not a sentimental writer. I think even in the Publishers Weekly, this reviewer said that I had that social realist look at the workers, and in fact he brought in Upton St. Clair saying, I don't.
Well, there's a very irony of the title, Under the Feet of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yes, totally. For more than one reason, of course. Also, I'm very concerned with how I was raised as a Catholic, and in fact, I believe in the institutionalized religion of Catholicism. There is that major patriarchal view that really is, again, very suffocating for women who are feminist, women who love the teachings of the Bible, but yet, you know, have just on a one-to-one basis and consistently been assaulted by the patriarchal view of the Catholic Church. On the one hand, you have Petra, who is very much faithful to her Holy Family and the statues, and in fact that's where the title comes from, because her important documents, like the birth certificates, she slips under the feet of Jesus, the statue of Jesus. On the other hand, you have Estrella, who realizes the potential and the power of love in her heart, and eventually realizes that the faith that she should have is faith in herself, and that's how she is going to see her world. And so,
and of course, her name means the star.
That's right. And I think, you know, I think that's where I am different from my mother in that sense.
Well, also you bring in the folk tales and the folk legends, the home remedies. I mean, these are people without visible means, many of them, and so they have to make do with what they have and what they can glean.
Right. Well, I think in many ways, I mean, you're living in we live in a very mystical society, you know, and for example, Petra not having access to doctors, and in fact, that's one of the major part 4 is the major climax where they're trying to get some kind of health care, and they can't afford it, and they can't, you know, it's not available to them. So she suffers from varicose veins, and so what she does is use a lot of garlic, and in fact that eases her varicose veins. On the other hand, you know, you had mentioned the moon and the eclipse of the moon, and to this day, it's a myth that myself, as a modern-day Chicano feminist woman, I still believe in. You know,
shouldn't go. Tell us that myth. You shouldn't go out into the full moon. Why?
That's right. I mean, and it's a thing that. And it's true. I mean, even as we were growing up, these were the stories that my mother and my aunts told one another. In that, when there's an eclipse of the moon, that and you're pregnant, that you have to carry a keys, so that your baby is not born with a hair lip. Okay.
Because you see a rabbit in the moon.
Right. Well, it comes from the Aztec mythology, where if you look at the full moon, you do actually see a hair. That's where you get the name hair lip. And when the sun passes against the moon, it's, you know, the Aztecs believed that the sun was eating up, biting the hair. And if you were there, if you were pregnant and you didn't have a protection against this, then you would get the hair lip. The sun would bite the lip of your child, and you would get the hair lip. And so that's where that came from. And I thought, you know, this is what I grew up with. This is what a lot of my generation still walk around with keys, just in case. Okay, just in case. But I like that aspect of our culture, where, you know, we have that certain magic, and it's okay to accept it, and it's okay to wonder about it, because God, I wish we had more magic in this world.
What other projects do you have working now?
Okay, well, I have, let's see, back at the Sundance, I actually started a treatment I would like to turn that treatment into a feature film, and it deals with a woman by the name of Modesta Avila, who was a Mexican woman that lived in Southern California and had a little piece of land. This was during the 1880s, and the railroad barons were coming in and just putting their train tracks. And originally they just started planting the train tracks across her land, and she went out and protested it, and they said, well, no, we're going to do it anyway. Of course, she was just a Mexican woman with a little piece of land, and so she took recourse, and she was not able to legally do anything about it. So she hung a laundry line across the tracks, and because of that, I thought this is truly a wonderful image of this woman not having any recourse but to do something on her own and hang a laundry line across the tracks. Well, because of that, she was tried twice and convicted on the second time as a felon and sent to San Quentin. I mean, she was sent to San Quentin, where she died 3 years later. And at the time that she was sent up there, she was pregnant. So that whole story, I think, that needs to be told. And I will work on that one. And I also have a novella titled Their Dogs Came With Them.
And you also teach, and obviously Ithaca is a long way from East Los Angeles.
Yes, I think my students have a good time with me, in the sense that I come in from a totally different perspective. I mean, one of the first things that I do when I come into class and say, okay, we're not going to be talking about point of view, we're not going to be talking about narrative technique, and we're not going to be talking about how to develop a good paragraph or how to tell a good story just yet. What we're going to be talking about is getting involved with our lives.
Telling those stories.
Yeah. You have to, first of all, you have to be a good listener, and then you have to be empathetic. I mean, you have to learn apathy. You have to learn to be compassionate. How else do you even think you'll be able to write a good story if you don't have these elements? Everything else can be learned, but compassion has to be worked for, and has to be, out there and excavated. And I think they all
and
have
looking
the
to the
capacity to do
keys that you carry in your pockets.
Yes, absolutely. And so I think I've opened up a few minds and really developed some really good writers that I think we'll see in the future.
I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Steve.
Helena Maria Montes is the author of Under the Feet of Jesus. It's just published by Dutton Press. Thank you for joining us on A Discussion With. I'm Steve Benson.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.